Apparently, I've lived anything but a normal life. That is according to my friends. My stories of dating, sex, and life in general tend to make them laugh, and for years, they've told me I needed to share them with the world. So I decided that in the middle of a pandemic, it was a great time to start a podcast about the things that, well, entertain me. So grab a cocktail with us and welcome to the hot mess that is my life as an almost 40-year-old single makeup artist living in a college town in Florida. This is Kara's Lipstick Diary. And you guys, we are back with another amazing episode. I am so excited about this episode, and it's going to be a little bit different than any of the others we've seen because, well, my guest isn't in Florida. She's actually out in LA, and she's on a lovely computer screen. I don't actually understand how we're doing this, but it's working. I can see her. I can hear her. We're going to do this whole thing with her in California and me in Florida. So Celia, thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
This is amazing. I have not seen this woman in 20 years, and she agreed to do this. So let's start out with some cocktails. She has her cocktail in California. I'm going to make mine right now, which is a cherry smash. I don't know what this is because you know me. I don't ever actually know what I'm making, but it involves gin and club soda and some other stuff and specifically 4 cherries. I don't know why it needs specifically 4 cherries. I don't know what will go wrong if I put 2 in or like 6, but it specifically said I had to use 4. So that's what we're doing. And of course I have my fabulous pink edible glitter in my drink because, well, what can you do without having your glitter? I mean, that's a super relevant part of your drink, at least in my world. So Celia is an amazing person. We went to college together. We were theater majors at Raleigh College Country Club. And she's the one that I referenced in episode 2 for being the person who I overheard talking in the green room that like women could masturbate, and I had no idea. Like, this was a shock to me. So Celia, you changed my life. You had no idea that you were changing my life, because I literally went back to my dorm room and like stood there in front of a mirror going, what the hell do I do? But like, you changed my life.
Well, that is my greatest joy, honestly. All I want is for people to masturbate and feel good and have good sex.
Well, and that's like, I've followed you on social since then, and like, you openly talk about it. And like, even up until a couple years ago, I was like, oh my God, she openly talks about this on social. Like, I mean, I know she did in the green room, but that's like friends. And I was a little shocked until I went into therapy and realized like, hey, you're allowed to talk about shit. Like, it's okay. But I've been so impressed, like how open you are about female pleasure and the importance of it.
I think we don't talk about it enough. I think we talk about female sexuality in the context, in the context of trauma, or with the idea that like women don't really enjoy sex. Like, I grew up with this sort of like story of women just lay there and men have sex and women sort of tolerate it, as opposed to like women also want sex. Right. And it made me feel like there might be something wrong with me, that I wanted to have sex and that I thought about sex and that I was intrigued by sex. Right. And so I really feel like it's kind of like, it's a thing I try to talk about with everyone. I worked in a couple sex shops. It's become like a actual like genuine part of my adult life. I'm writing a television show about it as we speak.
That's amazing.
Like, it's actually become like a really major sort of like drumbeat of mine that I'm trying to,
And like I say, you legit changed my life. I remember sitting there in the green room. She was Lady M in the Scottish play. And I was the little ASM freshman who was insanely green and naive. I had never even kissed a boy at this point. Like, I was the most innocent, naive thing ever. And I remember just sitting there and I was like, well, I was very quiet at that point anyways. I didn't really talk. And I just remember sitting there listening to you talk, and like, you were talking about a vibrator. Like, I remember the entire conversation, by the way.
Wow. Well, I wonder, it's so funny because the vibrator thing came up in a different conversation with someone else from Rollins recently. And she said that was the first vibrator she had ever seen in real life. So I have to give props to my friend Ben Rosenbaum, who gifted me that vibrator when we graduated from high school.
Oh my God.
So I brought that it was actually the third vibrator I owned at that point, but I brought it to college with me. One, because it was very funny.
Yeah.
That vibrator was called the tongue, and it was shaped like a tongue.
Oh my God, epic.
It looks like a whale tongue. And I don't know if they still make it anymore. Probably. And it really wasn't that effective, and it was loud and whatever. But like at the time, I didn't know very much. I didn't know very much, except that like I just knew I wanted to have sex and I liked it. And my group of friends in high school, we would like, once one of us hit 18, we'd go across the border to Alabama to buy sex toys.
Well, I remember after freshman year, we would take trips to Fair Villa, some of the theater majors, and we would all hang out, which was like a 3-story sex shop. That was an epic sex shop.
And you had to get like a membership to rent movies. Yeah. It was old school. Well, I don't know if you were there for this, but at one point we had at Fluke, the theater housing, smut and filth nights where we would watch porn. Okay.
Well, I did have, the production crew of Blythe Spirit, which was the last show of my freshman year. They all knew how innocent I was. And so they were determined to introduce me to all of this. And they basically like kidnapped me one night, tried to get me drunk and watch porn with them. And it was...
I should be really clear that I want to say like, the most important part of all of this is consent. And so I'm not super in favor unless you were down.
I was down for it in the fact that I knew I needed to learn something. Okay. But I also thought it was one of the weirdest things because they also had really bad porn. So it was like,
of course it did. Yeah.
70s porn, and it involved food. And like they kept going cauliflower, and I was like, "What the fuck does cauliflower have to do with sex?" Like, because I was so naive, I had no idea. I was like, "Is this part of sex?" Like, you guys are introducing me to things that I'm so confused by.
Yeah, that's amazing.
But yes, that conversation, you also, and again, this also changed my life. You have no idea the impact you had on my life.
I mean, I'm overjoyed, honestly.
You also were talking about the fact you didn't wear underwear. And I remember being, again, completely shocked because I was like, but you're supposed to. Like, this is a piece of fabric that I've been told my entire life you're supposed to wear. And it took me a while, but now I'm like, you know what? I'm not wearing underwear either. It's just a useless piece of fabric that just gets in the way.
I will say I have moved into the underwear wearing space.
Okay.
I think that was, I think some of that was like me also exploring my sexuality. Cause I think like, I think we live in a really, obviously, I mean, I'm not saying anything new, but like, we really live in like a heteronormative, like, don't talk puritanical, sex is this kind of thing. And, we didn't talk about that kind of stuff. No. And so part of like my process was like being as sort of extra or, provocative as possible to sort of explore it on my own. Yeah. So I will say, I had an awakening. I won't get too graphic, but I had an awakening, and I feel like underwear is important for me personally.
I'm not a fan now, but it took me, like, I literally could tell you pretty much everything you said in that conversation, and I didn't speak. So I just sat there listening, being like, this older girl seems to know things that I need to know about. And then I went and watched, like, Real Sex on HBO because that's like what it was. And there was that little old lady who had the like box of sex toys. Mm-hmm. Do you remember that? Who was that lady? She taught me a lot too.
I would have to look her up, but yeah. I'd have to look her up. It wasn't Nina, what's her name?
Oh, I don't know. She was Canadian or something, I think. And she was a little old lady with a box of sex toys. But I discovered all of this after overhearing you because I was like, okay, I have to figure out what this stuff, I don't know what a vibrator is. I don't know what female masturbation is. What am I supposed to touch? Like, I don't know.
I mean, and that's what bums me out so badly because like when I worked at the sex shop, I mean, the one that I worked at here, it was interesting. Like people would just sort of find you, like they would find the person that they they would sort of gravitate towards the person they most sort of needed. Yeah. And the people that found me the most often were women who didn't understand their, like, I should say, people with vaginas who didn't understand their anatomy, and trans folks who were sort of like readjusting to, like having just recently transitioned and like trying to figure out what the next
they're supposed to do now.
Was.
Yeah.
And which I'm totally honored by. Like those are my people.
That's a huge honor that they had the trust to come to you with those questions.
Yeah. And I was happy to like pass on like the butt plug and the kink stuff to like my coworker who was like an expert in that, you know, but like those were my people. And I remember it happened so frequently that people with vaginas would come in and I would say, you know, like internal or external, and they wouldn't know what I meant. And I would say G-spot and they didn't know how to find it. And these were people in their 30s, like not at all like children.
The number of women I talk to in our age demographic who don't enjoy sex and don't know that it can be pleasurable is shocking.
Well, and there's something too, like I read something years ago that, you know, some of this is also that there's a phenomenon of compulsive heterosexuality, which is that women are sort of not really because women are sort of told from the beginning that they are, that they don't really like sex. Sex isn't for women. They go through life not just really assuming liking sex. Yeah. Right. And then they might have an experience with another woman and realize, actually I'm a lesbian or I'm pansexual or bisexual or whatever, queer. And I do enjoy sex. I just never learn. And then there are also women who are straight who just have not had good sexual partners or weren't taught about their bodies. It's such an expansive problem, I think.
I recently, with another guest, sort of gave a guesstimate on my percentage of partners who were actually good and those who weren't. And I then went through and actually found my list because yes, I have a list and I put plus or minuses by them. And it truly was 75% of my sexual partners have either been really bad, like laughably bad, boring, or traumatic. And I'm like, wow, that's really bad. So I've only had like 25% of my sexual partners that have been like actually good. I like recently hooked up with a guy and he totally manhandled my boob. Like it was like violently shaking it. And I was like, honey, what the hell are you doing? What are you thinking is accomplished? And then he immediately just shoved his fingers inside of me. And I was like, okay, like what the hell is happening? And then when it actually got to sex, it was 3 pumps and done. And I tried to explain to him like, hey, like female pleasure, like let's discuss this. And he proceeded to then mansplain to me that I was wrong about female pleasure. And I was like, oh, motherfucker. Oh, motherfucker. Like, please leave my house now. But it was so like, I literally left the situation and I texted my friends and I was like, I am tired of being an orgasm receptacle to men. That is not what sex is supposed to be. My vagina is supposed to enjoy it as much as their penis. Thank you.
100%. And I think that's part of, I mean, you know, I really think men and boys are socialized to believe this too. Like cis het men are the default. And their idea is that we're just receivers for their cum, and that's the end of it. And they're not taught about our bodies either. They don't understand the number of like, I don't know, Reddit posts that I see that are like I don't know what a vagina does, or even what the difference is between vagina and vulva and all of that stuff. Men just don't know. And I mean, if I had to go through the list of partners, like I would say like, you know, the number that I've had to teach is exhausting. Yes. You know, and I hit a point like a few years ago where I was like, anyone I have to teach can leave before. Like we're not even going, you know.
I for years thought that as a woman, I wasn't supposed to say anything. Like just fake it. Just fake it. Get through the moment. Be done. That's what you're supposed to do. And it's only been in really the past couple of years that I've started being, not even that. I mean, honestly, in the past like year, that I've been like, yo, no, we're going to talk about this. We're going to like literally, if this isn't working, I'm going to say something.
And because again, women aren't taught, girls aren't taught to speak up or demand their pleasure. They don't even realize they have a right to it. And I think like, it's on everyone to learn how to pleasure people. But I also think like I got to a point where I stopped caring about the feelings of the people I was having sex with if it wasn't feeling good. And I was like, look, I'm here. I'm a person. I'm with you. I deserve to engage with you. And you have to make me feel good the way that you expect me to make you feel good.
Because this is a partnership when we are in bed. It is not a one-sided encounter.
It's also not just like, oh, sex is, you touch my tits, I go down on you, you go down on me, maybe you finger me, and then we fuck. Like, sex is, to me, a sort of like long-term play sort of situation.
It's an entire experience, not just the wham bam, thank you, ma'am.
Totally. And like, maybe we don't have sex that night. Maybe it's just that we go down on each other and that's good. Maybe
that
we
can
don't
be just as pleasurable.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also part of it. In relationships I've had, I've noticed that a lot of the men I've dated are like, sort of like really like disposed to, this is the order of things. And
I used to teach that when I was a sex ed teacher.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We taught the proper steps. P.S. It did not involve anything having to do with the female and her pleasure.
It never does.
And I'm like, I literally taught that to hundreds of kids when I was a sex ed teacher. And I look at it now and I'm like, holy shit, I didn't even realize how fucked up that was. Because like, I didn't know.
Yeah. Why would you? Yeah. I mean, it's not what we're socialized to believe or learn.
No.
It's really fucked up.
Yeah. Extremely fucked up. So what made you, because you sort of had more awareness of an awakening at a much younger age than I did. What made, like, where did that come from? Like, how did you know? Like, my family, sex, okay, I was taught about sex when I was 4, but like, it was also a very like taboo. My mother literally would say to me, the only thing I didn't want as a child was a female Scorpio because they're too sexual, and she got a female Scorpio. So I grew up thinking, oh my God, like I have to like push this down. Sexuality is bad. Sex is kind of bad and dirty. And I felt it in me, but like I had no way to communicate it, didn't know anything about it. How did you at a younger age know to go down that road?
I mean, I think part of it is that my parents have poor boundaries. So my parents also taught me about sex early on. And my mom tells me that apparently, like, rather than read bedtime stories, I would ask questions about sex. I was just naturally
You just naturally were curious.
Yeah, like they taught me about it when I was like 4 or 5, and I would continue to ask questions, and I was just really curious about it. I wanted to know everything. Did
you have the book, Where Did I Come From?
I didn't have that book. I had another book that was like about puberty.
Oh yeah, that's the same author. Yep.
Women's, and I had that, and I remember like I brought it out at some slumber party, and I was the only one who had it, and we all were like, "Oh my God, look at this book." But yeah, I also like, my father has like subscribed to Playboy since he was like 18 years old. Like my family just is really open about sex to the point where probably like there's probably some conversation I should have about it with a therapist, but like we just talk about it. And then I think the other thing that happened is that my mother was friends with lots and lots of queer folks. Yeah. And I grew up in community theater. And so like all kinds of sexualities were discussed with me. Everything was treated as like super normal, super easy, super like, and I know that that's not accurate, like to what was happening in society, but like in my bubble, nothing was sort of treated as like wrong
or taboo or
unacceptable. And so I just sort of grew up. I mean, I have to credit my parents. Like I just grew up with this like really open sort of like anything goes conversation. And that the conversation was really easy. Like if I had a question, they would answer it.
Right.
And when I started working, I worked at the Museum of Sex when I first moved to New York. And when I started working there, both my parents were like, great, send me a t-shirt. They both came to visit. They went through the exhibit.
God, I love that.
There was nothing weird about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of why I was able to explore in a way that didn't feel like I was doing something wrong.
Right. Well, and I was always I was half naked all the time. I was very comfortable in my body, but not in my sexuality. And I didn't see a tie between the two. I would go to events in like a bra and thought it was like normal clothing. I still do, y'all. It hasn't changed. And
I mean, it is. It's fine.
Like,
yeah,
and I was, again, in theater, so I would change clothes in front of anybody who was there and didn't think anything of it. But the actual sexuality was just terrifying. Absolutely terrifying to me and so taboo. You know, but I would walk around in a bra because, you know, that was okay.
Right. Well, because I think actually that's really interesting, because I think like women are not taught about the sort of connection between those two. Like, I think we're taught that our bodies are commodities for other people. You know, we're here for their consumption. And so like walking around in a bra isn't weird, but wanting to have sex
is weird.
Take it down a notch. You know what I mean? Like, it's really strange.
It's very strange.
You know,
it's very, very strange. But yeah, I mean, I remember I had an internship at Williamstown Theater Festival. And when I started that summer, I had never kissed a boy. I never kissed anybody. Like, it was not something I had done. And yet I was nicknamed the naked stage manager because like, I just didn't believe in like fully covered clothing. And like, it was such, everyone assumed that I was like a total, like, she was sleeping with everyone. She was doing this. And I was like, I've never done anything. Like, by the end of the summer, I discovered boys and alcohol. It was a great summer, let me tell you.
Right.
Ooh, as
that
I lose my
sounds
earpiece.
life-changing.
Hold on. Earpieces. I'm not good at them.
They're the worst.
They're
That's
terrible.
why I go with these giant
headphones. This doesn't fit in my ear. My ear is too small for an earpiece.
Same. I have the same problem. It's why I look like a weirdo with these big things, but then my hair covers it.
So it works. Like it works. That's fantastic. So I'm just like so excited that you're on the show because literally like it has been so long.
I know, it's been forever. I try not to do the math, but it's been forever.
Yeah. When did we become this age? Like, weren't we just in college? Like we were just at Raleigh College Country Club doing plays together. Like that's what we were doing.
Yep.
Do you like that? That's how I call our school. Like I can't call it.
I mean, it's true. It's accurate. Like it really is. I went back and visited like a couple, maybe, I don't know, right before the pandemic. So it's got to be about a year and change. And I was sort of stunned. I think I told you I took my fiance with me. And so like, I got to see it through his eyes and I was like, oh God, we really were.
Well, and it's even bougier now than it was when we went there. It's so funny because like I grew up in Gainesville, which like I mentioned to you is a very like crunchy granola type town. I had hippie parents and somehow because of scholarships, I ended up at Rollins and it is the bougiest school ever. Yeah. I had a kid that I mentored and I took her on a college tour to Rollins and they were talking about how in our like campus store, they now sell lobster to the students because they might need lobster tail for dinner. And I'm like, holy shit.
That place is
only our school.
It's a parody of itself.
It's
a parody of itself.
But we met some epic people there. So
yes. I have to say like, anytime I'm sort of like, oh, maybe I should have gone to a conservatory. I'm like, yeah, but I wouldn't have met all these, all these amazing,
right. We had great people we went to school with.
We did. It's true.
We had a cool school.
Yeah.
Well, like, so you are, like you say, you're writing a pilot that has to do with female pleasure. And I've noticed that in media now, we are finally addressing it on shows.
Yeah.
It's actually like there are multiple shows out now where it is openly discussed.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is. I will say like, so this pilot, I could do a whole episode on this pilot, but this pilot's been in development for 4 years.
Okay.
So when I first started talking about this pilot 5 years ago, people were not super receptive. So I would say that the change has come really quickly.
Yes.
And really recently. And I don't know exactly what the impetus is. I wonder if the Me Too movement sort of pushed things along because I think women talking about their trauma sort of naturally leads to wanting to then address pleasure.
Well, and I think
but I'm very grateful to see that more shows are doing it.
Not addressing female pleasure is oftentimes what leads to trauma.
100%.
It's all tied together. And I think the Me Too movement, all of that, I think also the fact that most of us watch shows now on streaming services that can get away with more is also a benefit for that area.
I think you're able to, you're able to write more daring things for sure. You're able to show more daring things. I also think the demographics of the sort of studio system are changing. Yeah. So you have people who are more open to these kinds of conversations. Like when I first started writing, I would have these meetings, and the first pilot I wrote was about, was a dark comedy about suicide. And then the second pilot that I wrote was this sexual, like it was a different version of this sort of female pleasure pilot. And it would always end in conversations about butt plugs or sex or something in my meetings, mostly because people don't really know how to talk about it.
Correct.
And so they were kind of excited to have someone who
would openly
was willing to talk about it. And so I think what I've realized or what I've noticed in the last 5 years or so is that the studio system is shifting a little bit, so that the people who are the gatekeepers for these shows are much more open and like ready to have, put them on the air, which is nice.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like looking back over media, HBO was when things started sort of shifting. Sex and the City was obviously hugely impactful on my life. That came out when we were college age, and that was, we had an entire episode about the rabbit, and I was like, what? But it didn't go much beyond that, and it didn't go into men wanting to make sure that women were satisfied. No. There was none of that. It was purely Samantha for shock value.
And I think I love Sex and the City, and it's really formative, and it's like my macaroni and cheese TV show. Yes. And also like when I watch it now, I'm like, it's like deeply problematic in a lot of ways.
Oh, very.
But what it did was, I think, like sort of break the, sort of break the barrier toward that conversation, and then has allowed us to go further into that conversation. I do wish that, I appreciated Samantha on that show. I wish that they'd had better conversations about other things, but
correct. But it was the first of its type.
But it was the first. Yeah. And the other thing that I really like about that show is that those women were in their late 30s.
Yes.
Which is the other thing that I really feel so frustrated about, is that like, as we get closer to talking about women's pleasure, we aren't talking about women's pleasure at 40, 45.
No, it's 22.
50. It's like you're 25 and then you don't want to have sex anymore, I guess, at 35. I don't know. But I feel like that is sort of like, that has been the more meaningful thing. Yes. When I rewatch Sex and the City, I'm like, oh, I forgot how old these characters were.
When I watched it, I wanted to be them. And I remember thinking like, I want to be you when I grow up. And I was watching it at 20, 21, 22. And now it's funny because, we are their age now. And I watch it and I go, oh shit, my life is a little bit like theirs, and it's kind of depressing. Like, how did this shit happen?
Like I've had moments where I'm like, it was so funny because I've become the person in my friend group who, like, if you want to buy a sex toy, I'm your like,
oh, funny. That's who I am with my friends. Yes.
I love it. And especially because I used to work at a sex shop. Yeah. We always go to that shop and I'm like, okay,
this is what you need.
And I still know a few folks who work there. So I'm like, help her out with this thing. But I went with a group of 3 other women friends. And when we left, we realized that like we were each a Miranda, a Carrie, a Samantha. And my friend was like, well, you're clearly the Samantha. You just bought the travel size version of the sex toy you already own.
Correct.
That you buy as Christmas gifts.
Correct. Like, I absolutely I'll take it. That. Like my friends were so shocked. They're like, you're literally on your podcast going to review sex toys. And I was like, yes. Yeah. Why wouldn't I? And I'll tell you, this one sucks. This one's great. Let's talk about it. Because some of them are not so great and some of them are epic. So like, hey, let's talk about it.
Yeah. And I also feel like, I mean, that's my biggest, like, when people say they want to buy one, I do sort of want to go with them to help them, because there are so many shitty
ones.
Or ones that I think are like really poorly made. Yes. And, you're going to get a fucking urinary tract infection if you use that one too often or whatever, and so I do feel really passionately about, and I also feel this is a thing that I half joke about, but it's really true. I feel super strongly about butt plugs. And so I like anytime someone wants to talk about butt plugs, I'm like, we have to walk you through this. Like you can't just like start.
You can't just start with that. No. Ease into that.
So I feel like, it's truly like my favorite. I'm always so honored when someone asks me about it because I feel like that's such a such a level of like a high level of trust.
Correct. It is beyond a high level of trust to be able to come to you about these things.
Yeah.
Because it is not something that people talk about and you make it safe. So anyways, they're telling me I have to wrap this up and I feel like we could talk for like ever.
Seriously, I could talk about it forever.
I might need to have you back on the show again because this was amazing. Celia, thank you so much. I mean, the fact that you took your time out of your day when you are like in LA being fabulous, like I beyond appreciate you. You're amazing.
I have my cat's on my bed and my bedroom behind me is a mess. I'm not fabulous.
Well, thank you so much.
I could talk to you all day about this.
Me too. Anytime. All right. Anytime. Well, you stay there because I need to take a selfie with the computer.
Okay.
But we're going to wrap up the show. So you guys, thanks for watching. I hope you guys got something from it. I loved having our guest on today. Thank you guys. We'll talk to you again soon. Bye.